Great, thank you.
Hold on, I can't hear you guys yet. Hold on here.
Okay, we are connected.
Okay, can you hear me?
Asha, you got us? We got you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Shaughnessy. I serve as chair of the Professional Counseling Advisory Committee for the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask that the members of the advisory committee respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that's being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Jim Kilmartin.
Present.
Good morning.
Good
Harry
morning.
Doctor.
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Melissa Briggs.
Present.
Good morning. Michael Countryman.
Present.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Acha Gores.
Present.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Bob Kircher.
Present.
Good morning. We know Andrew Secor will not be here. He called in. Edil Torres Rivera.
Yeah.
Good morning. Wow, beautiful sculpture behind you, by the way. Incredible. I want to know more about that sometime. I note the following BSRB staff members are also present. David Fye.
Here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Leslie Allen.
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
Thank you, Laura. This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the advisory committee or allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting as no individuals requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this meeting publicly by remote access, by conference call, and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to this meeting is conducted by a medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of KOMA are not suspended, so we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On February 16th, 2024, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who have requested notice of such meetings. The notice is also posted on the BSRB website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other media material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240 or send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And I did check the conference call line before we began the meeting. There's no one currently on the conference call line, but I'll let you know if I hear someone beep in.
Great, thank you, David. Okay, this meeting is now called to order and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on its agenda, which of course is agenda approval. You've seen the agenda. I need a motion and a second to approve the agenda unless we have anything we need to change.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Jim.
Second.
Second, and who is that? Was that Michael?
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. The motion passes to approve the agenda. The next thing we'll do is look at the minutes from the last meeting. You received the minutes in your packet that David sent out. Does anybody have any questions or feedback about those notes? Okay, then I would like a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting. Thank you.
I would
I
move
move.
that we approve the minutes from the last meeting. Bob?
I second.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Harriet. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you so much. The meeting minutes have been approved. And now we will move on to the executive director's report. David Fye, you know what to do.
All right, thank you, Laura. Let's go ahead and start with some operations updates. First, we are preparing for graduation. And so congratulations to all the students who are getting ready to finish their college or master's degree experience. And so looking forward to having more individuals apply for licensure and getting ready to take those tests. So we're ramping up our efforts to get ready for that.
Best report yet. Let's not tell him we can't hear him.
Oh.
He
Darn it,
froze.
looks like he dropped off.
Yeah,
You just froze.
yeah, he's frozen.
Hey, Laura. Hey, Laura. You guys know I'm in Japan right now. This is midnight. I'm
Oh
in
my
Japan.
gosh. That's
So,
incredible. Thank
this
you
is
for getting up for us.
yeah, this is midnight. So
Oh my God.
after dozing off, just know that I'm getting sleepy because it's midnight around here.
Well,
Wow.
you're an night owl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful though. I hear that you guys are preparing for some kind of strong weather, tornadoes or something like that over there. Is that
Yeah,
right?
we're gonna next couple of days.
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to stop my video here on my end and see if that affects the quality here.
Oh.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna try just to do it without the video on my screen to see if that helps with the connection this morning. So
Okay, thank you.
great. Well, as I was mentioning, the assistant director and I have been making presentations at different schools recently. And so we are visiting with students and also faculty from the schools that have different degrees in the areas that we regulate. And so we've been out to a few different schools like Newman and Friends in Kansas City. We'll be visiting with Avila coming up, and we've been out to KU. But it's a really good opportunity to kind of share information about the licensing process with those individuals. Additionally, to be proactive and share information about disciplinary issues and make sure that individuals know what to expect as a practitioner and their professional responsibilities. And so those are going well. And then one last operations update I thought I would make for you. Here in the next couple months, the BSRB website will be changing. The state of Kansas has reached an agreement with a company called Granicus, and they're switching over a lot of agency websites to a new platform. So the front page should look quite a bit different, but the website address will not be changing. And we should have all the same resources. So right now we're in the process of making sure that what we currently have on our website will be on the new website, but that's an exciting change. Tentatively, we're looking at maybe the first week in May in terms of switching over to the new website. In terms of some legislative updates, I wanted to let you know, I've mentioned previously a little bit about the BSRB budget and how it has to be approved by both the House and the Senate separately. We are to the stage now to where it has gone through the House side, it has gone through the Senate side. There were no adjustments by either the House or the Senate in terms of the monetary limitation for the BSRB. Just a reminder, we don't receive money from the state, but we do get an expenditure limitation. So the legislature does say, even though you have money in an account, we're going to limit you to a certain amount per year. And we actually propose what that limit should be. And then the governor makes a recommendation and the legislature tracks changes further. So the amounts that we had requested are the same amounts that are in our budget for this year and also for next year. And the Senate committee, when we went before that committee, we noted that the BSRB operates at a deficit by design. We bring in less revenue than we are currently spending on a yearly basis. And that is because the board lowered fees significantly back in 2019. And that was in an effort to draw down the balance in the BSRB fee fund. Since about 2019, the balance in the fund has gone down from about 2.3 million to about 1.9 million. And our yearly expenditures are roughly around 1.2 million. So on a year-to-year basis, it's going down. Probably when it gets to about 1 year of expenditures, we'll have to look to see if we can make some adjustments to keep things balanced. But it looks like it's going to be a little bit of time before then. There's a number of other factors in the mix. We do have some multi-state compacts that are being passed. If those would lead us to have a decrease in revenue, that could speed up the time frame to when we would have to start looking at possibly increasing fees to reach that balance. There's some other factors involved in that too, but the Senate committee that reviewed our budget was very complimentary of the efforts of the board. When the House committee was looking at the budget, they saw that the ending balance was still about 2 million or 1.9 million, and they asked us for a report back. So the board had a special meeting to review this information and make recommendations possibly on further fee decreases. The board did have a recommendation to decrease fees for behavior analysts and assistant behavior analysts. Back when the big decreases were put in for all the professions back in 19, behavior analysts did not see the same decrease in their license renewal fee. So the board went ahead and recommended for consistency that decrease of about $50 in their renewal fee. And also we oversee 7 professions, and different professions.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Hmm.
People do not like David this morning. I don't know why.
Wonder what's happening.
Actually, I'd rather know about Japan anyway. So, how is Japan's on my list next year to go to?
Wow.
I spend 14
Hey.
days circling the island.
I'm
We're
living.
going?
I'm on the island of Okinawa. Okinawa is like the
Oh,
of Japan. So come visit. I have a place for you here, brother.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
We
great.
can.
Well, I
Hey,
apologize.
hey, David. I'm keeping. When you stop, I start talking. So whenever
Okay.
you stop, I take over.
Well, I
Getting a
appreciate,
Japan travel log.
I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, that's very.
Oh, doggone it.
Just don't like him this morning.
No.
hey, mine was doing that
Weather?
last time we met.
Oh,
Oh, frustrating.
It's probably windy where he's at.
that's possible. So
You
is
know
it
what?
bad? Is it are the tornadoes going to come in the morning or in the evening? When are you guys expecting the bad weather?
This afternoon.
This afternoon. Okay.
Okay, can you
Northeast Kansas is supposed to get it late this afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, David, can hear you.
Okay, he's going off again.
hear me again?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'll try to kind of wrap things up here. That way we can move to the next item. But basically, we are in a place to where the legislature is getting ready to pass the appropriations bill for all state agencies, and we think they'll be conferencing this week. So we'll have to see what happens. But right now, there's no current items for the BSRB that are different than what the governor had recommended. So. And then just a couple things to highlight from past board meetings. We had a board meeting on March 11th. The board met. We're getting closer to an agreement with a company called CE Broker as a way for licensees to opt in to track their continuing education hours and their credit. The board is having a discussion about possible requirements of background checks for licensees. A lot of the multi-state license compacts require those. So the question is, does the board need to require those purely for the individuals in the compact or more broadly? The board has also received a presentation from a company called Acela that offers a new state licensing system. That is, they received a contract from the state last year to be able to provide sort of an enterprise licensing system, and there's about 6 or 7 other fee-funded agencies that are interested in switching.
I'll finish what David said on that. I was at that board meeting. So Acela made their presentation. It was very impressive. They know what they're doing, and it would be, we have money in the budget right now to make something like that happen. It would be advantageous to our licensees. And it would make, I think, life a little easier for Leslie and David, which is something I'm always thinking about because they work so hard. Leslie gave some feedback about some of the things she liked that she saw, and so it's very encouraging. So we are thinking about, we're obviously thinking about it, and as a board, we'll make a decision. I think probably later this year. David, are you there? Oh, I thought I saw him come on. Michael, it looked like you had a question.
Yeah, Laura, I think I might have missed a little bit of that. What was this? Is this a software or what was this?
Yeah, Acela is a company that comes on. They work with a lot of nonprofits and state governments to set up structure so that people can have an integrated IT system at their hands.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really impressive. They made a presentation customized to the state of Kansas. They already do a few licensing boards with Kansas, so they were pretty familiar with, a little bit about how our state works.
Okay.
Laura, are we talking about Acela there? The
I
license?
was. I just tried to pick up where you left off.
I appreciate that. It looks like the system had to restart here, so I think it looks like it's a much stronger signal now. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll knock on wood here. But yes, the only last item I was going to add for my report is that the board always holds an annual one-day planning meeting, and this is the opportunity for the board to discuss items that require some further discussion. And so that meeting date has been set now. It is going to be on Monday, September 30th. We're trying to nail down the location, but it looks like the current possible location is Lawrence, but 2 years ago it was in Kansas City. Last year is in Wichita, so we do try to move this meeting around the state a little bit, but right now we're trying to find a good location in Lawrence. So that is a public meeting. It's not broadcast on the channel based on the different wherever we have to put the meeting and different options that we have on location, but it is open to the public, so anybody who would want to come to that meeting can attend and hear the discussion. And of course, the minutes from that meeting are posted on the website afterwards as well. So with that, I will go ahead and end my report. And I know that there were probably some holes between what I was saying based on the technology issues. So if you do have any questions about any topics in particular, just let me know.
Any questions for David at this time?
Nope. Thank you for your report.
Yeah, and thank you for hanging in there with all the technology challenges.
Apologies again. So, yeah.
We all experience it at some point.
It sounds like we're all taking our turn.
Yeah.
I am to update on the professional counseling multi-state compact. There's not a lot of update right now. Greg Searles, the new executive director of the compact, is a very strong leader, and he's really, he does great with updates and keeping us abreast of what's going on. And his latest messaging about the rollout of the compact says that it will probably be at the end of the year that the compact will go live. And so that's all we know for now. And if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to David or me. We can drill down and get, specifics for you on what you might be looking for. But yes, we're looking for a rollout at the end of the year.
Okay.
So any questions about that today?
And I know last time we were together, we looked at kind of a map of who is included in that compact. Do all of these, and I'm just a little naive about it, so you'll have to fill me in. Do all the other states have to make the same approval? Is that the way it works? So Kansas works with all those states to get it approved, or?
We don't work with all the states to get approved. We work with the compact. We follow the laws of the guidance of the compact. And as long as we meet those requirements, we are allowed to opt in to the compact.
Okay.
David, am I answering that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, there's some standard language that all states have to pass, and you're not allowed to adjust that specific language. Now, above that, states have a little bit of flexibility to add something in. For example, some of our compacts, we have had a privilege fee the psychology compact, they charged the state of Kansas a $10 cost per person per year. So that was a way for the state to make up essentially the cost of compact membership.
Okay.
And for the social work compact, it operates differently. That's one that's going through the legislative process right now. But essentially, it would change things, and it would create a new multi-state license type thing. And so there would need to be the ability for states to charge a fee for a multi-state license fee, and how they choose to do that, that's kind of to their discretion. And so for the counseling compact, there would be the ability to get a privilege to practice in each member state. And so the part that would be left to the state's discretion would be, how much do you want to charge for your state's privilege to practice if someone wanted to practice in Kansas through the compact. But the basic language and the general requirements, all that has to be passed by every state the same way without any modifications. But then above that, you have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to things like fees.
Okay. And I remember the last time we met, there was a little bit of concern that the BSRB might lose some money in this process? Are you feeling better about that?
So for the counseling one, I think probably, time will tell. We'll have to take a look at, after we see things from the future. But you know, for the social work compact, it really does replace traditional state licensure. The ability to get a multi-state license will mean that individuals that live out of state that currently get licensed in Kansas, they will likely let those Kansas licenses expire and instead choose to get a multi-state license wherever they live. And so that's why we need to be able to charge a higher amount for a multi-state license for the people who live in Kansas. So that way we can make up for some of that lost revenue, but there's also additional responsibilities. And so there's kind of a logical connection for the social work one. For the professional counselor one, it remains to be seen how many people are going to prefer having a privilege to practice compared to a traditional license. There may be a reason why people decide, even though I could get the option to practice under a privilege, I actually still want to maintain licensure because it is different. And so it's not really apples to apples, unfortunately. And with the psychology compact, that one came first. That one allowed an authorization to practice under the PsycPAC Commission authority. And so it's even a little bit different too. It's an alternative to traditional licensure, but you have to still have a license in your home state. And then a lot of the abilities you get under that psychology compact, you get while you're physically in your home state. So that PsycPAC one, you can apply for the ability to do telehealth in different compact states, but that only works when you're in your home state. So they're all kind of set up a bit differently. For the counseling one, the nice thing from a revenue perspective is that Kansas will have the authority to charge a privilege to anybody who wants to come into Kansas to practice. So while we are likely to lose some out-of-state licensees, we don't really know how many people will choose to practice under the compact versus out-of-state licensure and how those numbers will balance. So kind of remains to be seen, but that's the thing for counseling, right?
I wonder how much it'll impact like reimbursements, because usually, with reimbursement, you have to be licensed in the state to file those. So that'll be interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, and we've heard that a little bit from the psychology compact. That at least, what we have heard from a few people is that even though the states are passing these compacts, the people that handle the reimbursement, those people have to kind of follow along too, and how they choose to deal with authorization to practice versus licensure. It's kind of outside of our control.
Right.
I think as more of these get passed and they get more familiar with how they work, I think, things are probably going to move that direction in terms of reimbursements being more clean. But right now, I think, given the fact that it's not, I think one thing that has complicated it too is that each of the compacts has kind of been very different, in my opinion, in terms of how they're set up. And so for the insurers or the people doing the reimbursements, they have to kind of understand what this means and what are the requirements. And so all being shaken out right now.
Well, regardless, it's a good first step.
Yeah. And I think, these compacts are all beneficial, I think. I mean, we want to make sure that individuals who have a need for services have individuals being able to provide those services. We want to make sure the public is protected. And as part of that, we want to make sure that the public has access to care. It's just trying to figure out the balance when we're moving from one system we've had for so long to trying to incorporate several different systems.
So
Michael, you're asking a great question. And when we go to our next member hangout, I'm going to raise that at the American State Counseling Board meeting because it's a great question. How are we getting prepared for reimbursement?
Sorry. So the compact is only for independently licensed counselors, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the need for, I guess, people who are still on the lower tier license will still have to have the state license, and then so maybe the fear is that once everyone becomes independently licensed, then they go to the compact, and then we'll have less or no individuals on the local level. Is that a fear what I'm hearing. I don't know. So I don't know. It looked. I was wondering. So, Laura, why do you think they're pushing it? Because initially it was that it was going to roll out in February or March, and then now it's end of the year. Why the delay?
Just all kinds of issues that they want to make sure they're solid on. FBI background checks, some of the other, things that they really want to have solid before they roll it out. David, are there any other reasons that you've heard?
Yeah, so I think there's also an issue of the counseling commission wants to be in a spot to where if they get a request for a privilege to practice, they can issue it right away versus receiving it and then doing an investigation to see if the person is eligible. So they are trying to work with states right now to help states get set up so they can provide information proactively on who can qualify for the compact. For example, there's a difference between individuals who have a degree with 48 hours versus those that have 60 hours. And the compact does require individuals to have had a degree with 60 hours. And so if certain individuals have been licensed with the 48 hours, those individuals wouldn't be eligible to practice under the compact. And so, but they may be fully licensed in wherever state that they're practicing. So it's not going to interfere with their ability to practice under their license, but it could interfere with their ability to get a privilege to practice. So I think they're trying to figure out how best to help states track that information and be able to provide it. So that way, when the compact is fully functional, people can get a privilege very, very quickly instead of they apply and then there being a delay at that point. So, but there's also a desire to make sure that the public is protected by having a good data system so that let's say right now, if someone wants to know if a psychologist is licensed in Kansas or has authorization to practice in Kansas, they can go to our license verification portal and look up the psychologist, and we will show everybody that we license. Well, if the person is authorized to practice telehealth into Kansas because of SIPAC, you can go to the SIPAC website and they have their own verification portal where you can show everybody who has authorization under SIPAC. And so that is a way for the public to know this person is not just practicing without a license, they just have a different authorization. So one of the things that each of these compacts is doing is trying to set up their own verification portal. So that way the public can take a look and say, okay, this person's not licensed in Kansas. Do I file a complaint or do they have another way to practice? And so that counseling compact has to have a way to verify, okay, this person is actually licensed in another state, but they do have a current privilege. So that way they can practice in Kansas. Yeah, there's a lot of new wrinkles, and I think they're trying to be proactive instead of saying, let's go ahead and make it live and then fix these things reactionary. I think they're trying to be more proactive at the front end, which I can appreciate because if things do go live and there are issues, even if we don't control those, we know we're going to receive a lot of those questions here at the office. So we want to make sure we work with them to make sure that we're all set up first.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions about the compact at this time? Okay, let's go ahead and move to old business, discussion of jurisprudence. David, do you want to take that?
Sure. At our last meeting, we had a discussion about the topic of jurisprudence examination. Just as a quick reminder, there are some states that have this as a requirement for licensure, and sometimes it is specifically a tool for individuals coming from out of state as a way to verify that the person who's going to be practicing in Kansas is familiar with Kansas requirements for law practice, but also some unprofessional conduct type requirements or expectations. And so Kansas does not currently have a jurisprudence requirement for any of the professions that we regulate, but some of our surrounding states do. And so this could be a helpful tool to make sure that we have less disciplinary violations and less disciplinary complaints. Make sure that individuals are more mindful of their requirements. And as we have individuals who could be coming into the state through these compacts, we've been having more of a discussion about this and trying to look to see what other states might require. So we sort of opened up this conversation at the last advisory committee meeting. After that point, the advisory committee chair, Laura Shaughnessy, and I met with an entity that does provide jurisprudence examinations to other states. We also did some research to look to see how many other states require a jurisprudence examination. And after looking at that data, it does not appear that Kansas is the outlier. It's not a situation to where only 3 states require it, but it's not a situation to where 90% of the states require it either. It's kind of a split. Some states require it, some states do not. For the states that do require it, it's handled in different ways. Sometimes it is more of a learning tool, and some states have paid to set up sort of an automated process to where you have to take it, but if you get it wrong, it teaches you what the correct rule is, and so you kind of understand the rule by the time that you get finished. Or let's say that if you miss it, it'll be replaced with a question, and you keep taking questions until you get enough correct. Other ones, it's a pass-fail type option, and you take a test. Some of these are written, some of these are electronic. But what I think we saw is that, at least in the states that offer it, they offer it for a fee. And that's not a fee generally that will go to the regulatory board. So if we implemented something like this, we would not receive the fee, or if we did, it would be a pass-through. Essentially, if we contracted with a group to set one of these up, it would be an additional cost to licensees for a good reason, but it would be an additional cost. It could also be looked at as an additional requirement for licensure. And we know that with the current climate and kind of pro workforce movement right now, even though we have real good reasons for wanting to make sure the public is protected and licensees are informed about these items and mindful, we've had some internal discussions about how it might be sort of difficult to implement this the traditional way. And so I talked recently with Laura about sort of an outside the box type approach to this. And we wanted to kind of bring it to you to get some of your thoughts on this too. And Laura, before I kind of go down that road, is there anything else you wanted to say about our research into jurisprudence examinations and other things?
No, I think you covered it. No, go ahead.
Okay. So we do think we'll probably get a fair amount of pushback if we make this a requirement for licensure. And anything for an additional fee, there's probably going to be a fair amount of pushback as well. So it got me thinking, how best could we accomplish this goal in a different way? And as I have been studying the different philosophies from the professions that we regulate, I was looking at another profession, and they were talking about something called a token economy, where you instead look at alternative means to motivate behavior. And if you can find something that people have an interest in and you can do the right setup, perhaps there's a way that you can help individuals motivate themselves, and then you're not it's more of a carrot approach than a stick approach. And so what we were kind of discussing and wanted to bring to you was perhaps a different model where this would not be a requirement. It would be more of an optional type thing that individuals could do. Perhaps we could look at a platform to where we might offer this more of a live type process versus a written or on-demand type process. And so let's say quarterly, maybe the BSRB could offer 1 hour where we would walk through questions that someone might see on a jurisprudence examination. And maybe we would have a way for them to log in with their license number, and then we would be able to score them as they go. But essentially, we would treat it almost as if it was like a live jurisprudence examination. But we could offer 1 hour of continuing education for free for anybody who wanted to do it. And then we could publicize this, like I said, offer it quarterly. And as long as we had some assistance with crafting those questions and putting that together, we think there might be interest from licensees that might choose to do it, if nothing else, because of the free 1 hour of continuing education. And in a way, it's almost kind of like live trivia in a way. It could be something fun that people might look forward to. And if we keep track of how well they do, perhaps there could also be some incentives for how well people do and compared to getting questions correct versus questions incorrect. But keeping track of it as they go would be a way to also verify attendance at these types of things. So I just kind of want to bring that to your attention and see what you thought about that. Like I said, I think the biggest hurdle would be trying to come up with good questions that would cover the topic areas that we want to have addressed. But we have the resources here to do a lot of things live, and it would avoid the cost component. And as licensees, I'm curious what your thoughts are, if that would be a good motivator of a 1 hour continuing education type reward for doing that. I thought maybe if the board is in favor of it and the advisory committees think it's a good idea, we could test this out. Like I said, maybe offer it quarterly, collect feedback to see how many people are interested in doing this, and then the response we get from it. But what are your thoughts? It's kind of, like I said, it's an outside the box approach, but it would avoid the issues of making it a mandatory requirement and charging a fee. So what are your thoughts on a model that's kind of set up like that?
Would that take the place of the continuing ed that's required in ethics for a license renewal?
Well, I think if we did it for 1 hour at a time, we could probably say that this would be an ethics continuing education hour. So it'd be 1 hour.
Yeah.
You still need to get 3 hours
Right.
over the time period, but yeah, it could be 1 hour of your ethics.
Makes sense to kind of see what the interest is. And the only thing I could think of that could be a barrier, I could see people expressing concern. If it's every quarter, they could do it the next quarter or something. But that tends to be where people like with those live sessions, people tend to like to do it whenever they want. But since they have plenty of opportunities, I think it makes sense. I think it's more proactive and doesn't have that punitive response with you have to do this and you don't, and it costs you more money. And 2 other states that I'm licensed in both require those exams, and one is a very lengthy. And so I could see it being a barrier for people, but this might, if we get people really interested and they realize, oh, these are things we really should know, maybe down the road we could look at adding it as a requirement, and or seeing if it really does become and it is important information that you don't typically get unless you do this. So I see a lot of positive with doing it this way.
Can you share how much you have to pay for those jurisprudence exams in your other states?
I feel like one of them is $10 and the other is $25.
Okay, thank
So
you.
they're not like wildly crazy, but
Yeah.
I had been licensed in Texas. I've let that license lapse several years ago, but every year we had to take a jurisprudence exam. And it seemed to be rather redundant. What I recall is it seemed to be the same every year, but yet we had to do it every year and pay for it every year.
Mhm.
The model that David is talking about would be more interactive and live. And the thing I like about that is, as the complaint review committee, Leslie, David, as they experience things going on in our state, they can really tailor make the questions and the topics to the things that clearly need to be covered or reinforce the changes in our statutes and regs. So I think the idea of it really being live and interactive is going to be a bonus for that reason.
Yeah, I agree with Harriet. If we're able to adapt it, I think people will stay interested. And I really like the idea of it being free of any cost.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
carrot, free CEs.
Yeah, I was thinking, that's really good, especially if you try to renew our license and making one of the ethics and maybe ethics the credit to be a jurisprudence would be very good. One thing I maybe we should think about. I don't know whether it's even possible to add this, is that when somebody is coming from out of state through a reciprocity, for example, getting a jurisprudence is just a very good way. I remember when I first came to Missouri and I did the jurisprudence, it helped me to see what counseling was like in Missouri. It really helped me a lot. So I don't know whether there's a way to do some for those who are in state and those who are coming from out of state, and make them to actually go through it as part of the package of becoming transferring one's license to Kansas. I don't know whether it's possible to do that. If it maybe it's too cumbersome, I don't want to give you guys more work to do. Just thinking aloud there.
So Acha, are you saying make it mandatory for anybody coming into our state for the first time, or tailor make the question?
Yes.
Make it
Yeah, yes.
mandatory?
For those who are coming in the first time, who are coming to get a counselor's license through reciprocity, that's mandatory. But those who are in the state, who are licensed in the state, who are practicing here, they do what David is saying. It's more optional. It's because they already know the laws anyway. So that's kind of in that way because I think when somebody coming into the state newly, this is their introduction to the state of Kansas. The jurisprudence, I think, is good. That's my take.
So David, if we made it mandatory, would that be a reg level decision?
I think this would probably be a statute. I'm guessing that if we did something along these lines, it would probably need to go into a bill. Now, if we're doing something with the continuing education offering, I think it would fit under the existing description. So we could offer it as something, optional under the continuing education. But if we wanted to make it mandatory for any group, I think we'd probably have to put it in the statute.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Don't take more work. I don't want to give you more work.
But I mean, there is a benefit, and honestly, too, we were talking about this. This would be a good motivator for individuals who are seeking licensure or ones who are already licensed. But for those of you that are wanting to do it under the privilege model, there's no requirement for them to do continuing education here. So haven't really figured out the good motivator for that group of individuals, but it could be helpful for them too, just since they're not required to do CEs for Kansas under the privilege model. That's another kind of wrinkle.
So what are you saying that maybe students finishing programs might be able to take it?
I'm not sure. I just think, for individuals who are licensed, the continuing education could be a good motivator. So individuals who want to come over, get licensed through reciprocity,
Okay.
already licensed. But for the privilege to practice, there's no CE requirement specifically for Kansas anymore, like compared to licensure. So for those individuals wanting to practice under the compact, there wouldn't be the same motivation. But that would be a good group to do something like this. I haven't just quite figured out the right carrot approach for that group.
Sure. Okay.
I like it just I don't like anything that's mandatory, but I like the idea that you have the choice to take something that's gonna help you in the long run. So,
Okay.
and the idea of continuing education, I know in ACA have been a hit, because people need the continuing education. So that's a great motivator.
Well, we'll try to put a little more development into it, and we're kind of floating this idea out to the other advisory committees too, to see what their thoughts are and see if they have some additional comments to add. We'll bring it back to the board and see what the board thinks. But yeah, I think the only wrinkle I could see is with 7 different professions. There might be a handful of questions that would be consistent between the professions, but I'm sure there would be some unique topics we'd want to cover for each of them, and we could get a little bit of assistance with writing some of those questions. That would be helpful, but I think we could just maybe reach out to a few members of the different advisory committees if a few of you would be willing to kind of help out once we get to that point. So.
Yes, we'll be asking for your participation when the time is right. So be thinking about if you want to be a part of that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, new business. David, you're going to talk about advisory committee membership.
Yes. So as you're familiar with, advisory committee members serve 2-year terms, and you are able to serve up to 4 terms for a maximum amount of service on the advisory committee of 8 years. And so we are trying to do a good job of making sure that we track these appointments from the chair of the board. And I reached out to all individuals who are coming upon the end of a term at the end of June 2024, and to see if those individuals would like to be reappointed for another term. And so 3 of the individuals were interested in being reappointed. But Asha, since you're now living overseas, you mentioned that it does create some pretty significant logistical issues with you being so far away and in a different time zone. And so you indicated that when you're position expires at the end of June, that you're interested in stepping with the advisory committee.
Yeah, I did. I feel I wanted to continue on, but I just felt like it would be very unrealistic, because right now when we finish at 2 o'clock, I have some clients all day tomorrow morning, so it's going to be very rough to to continue to do that. So
You're not willing to stay up all night with us?
so yeah, it's I'm a night owl, but when you have a full day on following day, it's just difficult. And, so yeah, but I talked to David about this. I'm feeling bad that I wanted to juggle both of them, but it's just not realistic. Really not
Sure, of course.
Absolutely, and we appreciate your service on the advisory committee, and I've really enjoyed having you as a member. Totally understand the reason for you not seeking reappointment, but according to the advisory committee policy, it does say that you have the board member for that profession, a public board member, and then the rest of the members of the advisory committee are non-board members. They're usually licensees, and the number that should be on the advisory committee is between no less than 3 and no more than 10. And so currently the non-board members on the advisory committee is 8, but with Asha going off the advisory committee at the end of June, that will put the number at 7. So basically around this time of year, I always talk to the advisory committees and I say, if you are interested in seeking new members for the advisory committee, traditionally what I have done in those cases is send a message out to all members, all licensees, and let them know the advisory committee is seeking individuals to self-nominate themselves for consideration. And if they're interested in being considered, they could submit a resume and a letter of interest, and then those will be forwarded to the members of the advisory committee for review and consideration. And then at your next meeting in June, you could have a discussion about those applicants, highlight the ones that stood out the most to you that you think would make the best advisory committee members, and then you could forward those recommendations to the chair of the board, who is the individual who has ultimate authority to make appointments to the advisory committee. So you don't have to, if this is something that you're interested in, you don't have to make a decision today as far as how many people to kind of target. You could wait to see how many people apply and then make that decision at the next meeting. But kind of wanted to bring that to you and see what your thoughts were.
So thank you to all of you who are going to stay on. And Acha, we will miss you. You're going to be at the June meeting, correct?
Yes, I will be at the June meeting again. This was very I would say very appreciative of the privilege and the opportunity to serve with this wonderful group here. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for being a part. You've been great, and we've really enjoyed your participation. And I'm glad we'll see you again in June.
Absolutely.
So David, great. You'll float an email out and look for people who want to join, who are interested.
Yeah, as that sounds like something the advisory committee would like me to do again for the approach. I'm happy to do that. And then I will distribute those materials that we collect. And so that way at the next meeting, you can have a discussion. The advisory committee policy does say a discussion on new advisory committee members is done publicly. Essentially, you can either come to a consensus or you can vote on who you think stood out the most. There's some flexibility there, but in between now and the next meeting, I'm happy to go ahead and send that out, collect the information, and distribute it to you in advance so you can be ready for that discussion.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's do that. Thank you so much. Okay, discussion on board approved supervisors. This will be a fun one.
Yes, and so in your packet, I did include a document for you, and that is historic number of licensees. And so this is something that we put together and give to the board every full board meeting, and it kind of shows the changes in membership for the different levels of licensing BSRB regulates. And for professional counseling, there are 2 levels of licensure. There is licensed professional counselors, which is, of course, the non-clinical level. And there are currently 1,108 individuals in that group. And then for the clinical level of licensure, there is currently 1,298 clinical professional counselors. And a few years back, there was movement and motivation to create board-approved supervisors, specifically as a process by which individuals would meet certain requirements to be officially deemed a board-approved supervisor. And since that time, the profession of professional counseling and marriage and family therapy have implemented that. The reason I provided this list to you is because currently, I pulled our numbers to see how many board-approved supervisors we have for professional counseling, and that number is about 250. And that number includes about 5 individuals from other professions, but the vast majority of those individuals are clinical professional counselors. But if you compare the number of clinical professional counselors, 1,298, to the number of board-approved supervisors, which is about 250, there's far more individuals out there that are clinical professional counselors that are not seeking that board-approved supervisor status. Now, you do have to have 2 years of practice at the clinical level, and there needs to be, avoidance of disciplinary issues. So not everyone who is a clinical professional counselor would qualify, but given the number of, let's say for the example, the other professions, there's a smaller pool of individuals that could be providing supervision, in part because of the board-approved supervisor requirement. And so the board has been having a discussion recently about board-approved supervisors. In the past, there has also been an effort to add board-approved supervisors for the profession of social work, but those efforts have not passed the legislature and have been opposed primarily because of concerns that it would reduce the number of individuals who would be willing to provide supervision for social workers. And recently there have been conversations about individuals providing supervision to professional counselors and marriage and family therapists, and lack of availability of supervisors. And individuals have been seeking a supervisor outside of their profession, and a lot of what they have argued has been lack of availability. And so the board kind of, at the recent board meeting, made a recommendation to start the process to roll back the requirement of having board-approved supervisors. It's something the board has been sort of wrestling with as a big picture type item, but this is something that would need to be a change in a bill because the board-approved supervisor status is something that is in law currently. But I kind of wanted to bring it to you to make you aware of that action by the board, and sort of the issues involved. I think there is still a strong preference that for professional counseling, that supervision be provided by professional counselors, at least based on your comments as an advisory committee and what I have heard from other individuals in the profession. And the same is true for marriage and family therapy. But I think that is going to be very, very difficult to both have that and also have the board-approved supervisor status and requirements. So I wanted to bring that to you. And Laura, do you have any other comments that you'd want to make on this topic as well?
Just that, it really is one of those situations where it boils down to an either or. And as far as counselor identity, when we looked at what our options were, when it came to counselor identity, the feedback that we've always had in the advisory committee and actually on a board level is that counselor identity is more important at this time than having board approved supervisors. And if one has to really take the place of the other, that we would rather stick to counselor identity and really support that counselors need to be supervised by counselors. I don't know if that makes any sense. Am I making sense?
Makes sense. I'm just wondering, do we have any data on why so many clinically licensed counselors are not wanting to be board certified? Is it a lack of not understanding the process? Is it, I do often hear like, oh, I don't have that training, or I didn't take that, like I don't know what steps I have to take type thing. It's not, but in some states, like I said, I'm licensed in Texas, it's super rigid to get board approved. Like you have to take a very specific, very lengthy test or very lengthy training. So I would say, although I understand why we would go that direction, To me, it's a little like it's regressing in our movement forward into standardization and structure. I'd say it'd be very helpful to know why it's not working before we actually took it away. Because if it's an easy fix, then maybe we could just get more board approved supervisors, unless most of them are brand new or within their first 2 years. And then it really doesn't matter if you take it away because it's the same problem. You don't have people that can do that supervision either way.
Isn't it currently required for the counselor to get that board certification?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was. And I'll just throw this out there. I don't think this will impact anybody's decision. When the BSRB put the requirement in place for my licensure to have that, I was a bit disgruntled about it. I didn't really want to do it. I did go through the training. I think it was about 8 hours, something like that. And I appreciated it. I became a much better supervisor because of that training. I understand the arguments both ways, but I will tell you the training was great. And the documentation they taught us about the legal parts of it. It was great training. So I just want to throw that out there. And I do think it made me a better supervisor.
I will say something, and Laura said something that just kind of triggered me, is that supervision came out of cancer education. We were the first talking about supervision. Okay, that's where our identity is: cancer education and supervision. So I think that the idea of all the doctor programs have the basis on the supervision piece. Okay, so not having the training for supervision for me is a nonsense, because supervision is where we make our money. Where our students actually show that they know how to do what we ask them to do. So without supervision, I think that we thrive without actually some kind of training on supervision. So I've always come when we talk about cancer identity, I never thought counseling being just a cancer without supervision. The CESPs, cancer education and supervision, always came together. Was no one without the other. I mean, the first journal on supervision came the CES. The psychologists later provided one, but we were the first one to talk about supervision long before social workers and psychologists. Just saying.
Yeah.
It's a part of the professional counseling identity in and of and by itself.
Yeah.
And has been historically. That's not a new thing. And I would agree with Adil.
Got it. Leslie and David, do you get feedback from folks? I mean, to go back to Melissa's question about, what keeps people from pursuing becoming a supervisor? Do you have any feedback about why that doesn't happen enough?
Obviously I can't speak for everyone, and really the only people that we usually hear from are people who are complaining because they have to do it and they don't want to.
They don't want to.
The people who don't have it don't really contact us. They just think they don't meet and they don't, I would imagine.
I have heard comments that there is a lack of availability of supervisor training. I don't know how prevalent that is, or if that, individuals would want to do the training in a certain place. But that is something I have heard, at least as part of this.
Is there a way to make that training beneficial but shorter, to where maybe it's done on their time frame, online, something like that, and then just take a little short test or something?
Well, the way it is currently, no, because the statutes, we would have to change statutes or regulations to allow that, but it could be changed.
Yeah, I didn't know if, if they showed this different level of training, and took an exam, if that would be good enough. I don't know. Or is it better to have them go through the full 8 hours?
It's actually 15 right now.
I was going to say, I think it's
Oh,
15. But if you do your PhD or even an EDS with specifically in supervision, then that is all acceptable, which I kind of wonder if we take if that requirement, if that's going to impact universities in those training programs. But I'm also not sure if those programs are producing board certified supervisors, but you would think that they would be, because that is a very specific training and supervision. I just feel like the more data we could have on what is stopping people would be very helpful, because I've seen a huge growth in people, rise in numbers in EDS and PhDs in counselor education and supervision. We've seen at K-State larger numbers. And so it seems interesting to me that if none of them are going, or fewer of them, or not a very large ratio of them, are going on to get their board certified supervision piece. So it just seems like regression to me, but I understand why, because it's a barrier. But
right. Well, what you're trying to suss out is how can we keep it a requirement and not a barrier?
Right.
Yeah, I would
I mean,
agree.
seems like the universities, if it is training, it seems like going to the universities and saying, hey, people are needing these trainings, seems like they'd come up with certification or something that might produce that pretty quickly. Since supervision is really a core part of counselors' trainings already.
Well, but the outcome of the training is really to show. So it seems to me if somebody can prove that they're proficient in certain areas, that should be enough to get that certification, if we're easier. So is it necessary, and I'm not going one way or the other, is it necessary to attend something for 15 hours if you're already proficient in it?
So you're saying start with maybe an exam, a test, and if you meet those qualifications, then you don't have to go back through or maybe you attend specific parts of a training module that catch you up in areas that you might not be proficient in, something like that.
Yeah, because I would assume that what's holding people back is usually it's always one of two things, time or money.
Right.
And so if you tackle those two things, usually you open the door a bit.
So some master's programs include a requirement of taking a course in supervision. That was the case in Oklahoma. When I was in Texas and I was working towards my approved supervisor status as a family therapist, one of the things that was required was getting supervision on my supervision. That was part of the process, which I really appreciated that. It gave me a lot more confidence and support to meet with my supervisor who was supervising my supervision. So I don't know. I think the support that is available in that kind of model was, really wonderful. I think, some people fear taking on the supervisory status for all of the complications that may be involved in that, where you had an ongoing process of having a supervisor for your supervision while you were working on that status.
Yeah.
And at the university level, that's usually a part of the process for training you to be a supervisor, is that you're being supervised as you supervise. So that's a part of the programs in most places at the PhD level.
I'm wondering if maybe there's a like you don't have to take another training if you have a PhD. You can turn in your documentation for your PhD, or if you took a course in supervision, you just have to show you've been trained in supervision. Yeah, and so I wonder if that is if that's not well understood. If people see it and then they're like, oh, I have to take a training. Oh, I don't really want to take I don't have time to take another training or whatever right now. I'll do that later. I'm not going to take any supervisees yet anyways, right? So then they just postpone. But it was, I thought it was a very easy process, again, compared to other states. I just turned in my PhD information and it was more than enough. So I think that, maybe it's communication piece. Again, all this the more data we would have, the better to know like what are people's perceptions, and or I would guess that people that have been supervisors already, but we're past that time now, I feel like. But at the beginning, people were like, oh, another step, and I've been doing this for years. Like I could see that have been a barrier at the beginning, but we're several years in now that I feel like those people hopefully either got it, or they're not still that upset about the requirement.
Do we know how many supervisors we're producing every year? Do we have any sense of how many? Because I know when we started the process of training supervisors or approved supervisors, I still remember at MNU we had this training with Dr. Fry and somebody else. I'm not sure who that was, and it was like Michael said, it was great training. Had a lot of things that looking at supervision from all the theories and all that was really good. But I'm sitting down here, I'm just thinking to myself, in a doctoral program, there was always supervision was always part of it. You just, you can't do counselor education without supervision. It's just part of the deal, So there's a side of me that's thinking with Melissa that this regression to not add that as a piece. But also I can see the problem. So I'm wondering, do we know how many we are producing a year, or this 250 came at the very end, at the very beginning, and then nothing else after that? Because there's some barriers, we should take some barriers off.
So David and Leslie, do you have any of that data?
I can't tell you when people were, but I get several applications a month.
For supervision?
For supervisors to be approved, yes.
Okay.
So I have a question. So when you say that there, you were making a comparison between the number of approved supervisors to the number of licensees, is that the distinction that you were making earlier?
Yeah.
Okay. But you're also assuming then that those who are LPCs want to move on and want that supervision. And many, it's a permanent license. They can stay there for as long as they want.
Sure. No, it was more so to highlight the number of clinical professional counselors compared to the number of board-approved supervisors. I think right now there's about almost 1,300 clinical professional counselors, but there's only about 250 board-approved supervisors, and that number of includes 5 people from other professions too. So it's really kind of 245 board-approved clinical supervisors that are professional counselors. So,
okay.
And I know that there's other requirements, as far as being a clinical level for at least 2 years, and you could be disqualified because of disciplinary reasons too, potentially. So it wouldn't include everybody who's part of that 1,300, but we know having to be a board-approved supervisor that it does rule out quite a bit of people who could be supervisors that are currently not choosing to do the board-approved supervisor path.
Is there a certain ratio that we would like to see between the number of clinically licensed people and the number of supervisors?
I have not heard about that. Most of the feedback that we get are individuals who are submitting new training plans, and they're in different work sites, and there's not a board approved supervisor at their work site. So they're searching for someone who they may have no relationship with, or requesting to have an alternate supervisor that really their request doesn't meet the qualifications for needing to have that person be approved. And so it does create some friction, and kind of trying to resolve that issue, and also take into account what the advisory committee has talked about before, that there is a desire that professional counselors do receive supervision by professional counselors, and some of the identity topics for the profession. Now, if there was going to be a change to the statute, that is something that would have to go through that through the statutory process, which it means a bill would have to come about, and that would have to go through that process. So there are, there's quite a bit of time before the next legislative session. I don't want to jump ahead too far, but the next item on the agenda does talk about survey. And so we talked about, some of you mentioned wanting to collect more data on some issues compared to here. So that might be something we could kind of transition into the conversation on that topic, if that sounds good.
Before we do that, David, I want to make a few comments. I was actually going to just mention that about the questionnaire. It sounds like I don't hear anybody saying, let's remove the requirement for counselor supervision. I don't hear anybody saying we should remove it. I do hear, let's get the word out. Let's do a survey let's ask some questions and get more data, as Melissa mentioned. Let's find out why and where are these the potential supervisors, why they aren't, why are they not, why do we not have a bigger number? And as David mentioned, it does give us an opportunity, if we really feel strongly about keeping the requirement for supervision for board approved supervisors, this is an opportunity for us to create everything from an awareness campaign to get more people involved in supervision, and to find out why it's not happening. What can we do to make supervision more enticing? So if we're going to keep it, we just need to work at it a little bit to make sure that we get more supervisors out there. So, David, what action items can we take at this point in that regard? I always think about how much work I put your way, but would it be advantageous to put something out to all the potential supervisees to let them know that it might be easier than they realize to become a supervisor?
Well, I'm not sure. In terms of promoting the board approved supervisor requirements, I'm not sure if the BSRB has ever sort of proactively sent something out to licensees about that. Leslie, do you know anything about any kind of campaigns as far as promoting the board approved supervisors?
No, we have not.
I honestly think the next step could be, if you were interested in putting together like a survey, that might be a really good opportunity to kind of collect information about why people maybe haven't gravitated towards that, or and that could be, the survey itself could be a way to kind of spotlight some of the requirements and inform people that maybe this is not as daunting as it might seem, and maybe individuals would be interested in doing this, or maybe maybe it is not the barrier. Maybe it's more a matter of choice in certain ways. I'm not sure, but it would be a good opportunity to kind of collect some information, I think, if you wanted to do a survey with that.
So first step, integrate it into the questionnaire and then use that data to move forward. That sound like a good idea to everybody? I see.
Just one more thing I'm thinking about now that we said that. What Michael said then was that it looks like it was a day 8 hours, but I also hear 15 hours. How about at our level here, we say that it'd be good to have a supervisor training that is 8 hours instead of 15. And if you're 7 hours away, that makes it manageable, but it also would have a lot of information with that. I don't know. I think at this level we can do that. I don't know, would that need to change in the law, or maybe.
I just want to just share me in something really fast. You know that also MBCC have an approved supervisor certification, right? Who actually dictate what areas of supervision need to be covered. Okay, so I mean, so I know it's the discrepancy between hours here, hours there, you know, but I know the MBCC also have some guidelines on what supervision should look like. And I know that when I was in Virginia, I had to spend 3 weekends taking training for them to give me a approved clinical supervision credential. So
And the state of Virginia honored that as their supervision training?
Yes, Beijing, but you have to take the training, which is about $700, you know, so they will not make you a supervisor unless you have that training. Okay, so I think that there's some we have some standards of how a supervisor approved a member, what you call boards approved supervisor should look like. I'm thinking in Spanish and talking in English. So anyhow, so I think that that's something that we don't have to reinvent the wheel because it's already invented.
Right.
I believe that when the committee designed the supervisor training requirements, the content areas that are included were taken from the NBCC training.
They were.
And I believe at that time it was 45 hours. Theirs is 45 hours. And they wanted to do that, but then they moved down to 15. But it was integrated from the NBCC training.
How long ago was that, Leslie?
I believe it was 17.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions or feedback at this time? Okay, well, this leads perfectly into our discussion on the questionnaire for professional counseling.
So,
David, go ahead.
Thanks, Laura. At the last meeting, we talked a little bit about one of the decisions that was made earlier this year, and that was to essentially purchase a license to be able to do a survey for each of the professions under the BSRB. The social workers have done surveys in the past, and I'll go ahead and share my screen here. In your packet of material, the social workers asked us to put together a survey and send it out, and we collected data based on some topic areas and then formed questions with the members of the advisory committee, and then sent out the survey to all social workers, and then combined that information into a document that's posted on the BSRB website. And I included that in your packet of material. I know it's pretty lengthy, it's about 62 pages, but really page 2 has the specific questions that were asked to all the different social workers as part of the survey. And so it was about 14 questions. I think on average, it took about 7 to 8 minutes for people to complete. But there were some demographic questions to make sure that we had a pretty good sampling of individuals. There were some questions that they were asked about their multi-state compact that was going through the legislature this spring. There was a series of questions on the licensure examination for their profession and whether Kansas currently does require passage of a national examination for each level of social work license. And we just came right out and asked our licensees, should Kansas discontinue that requirement of having a national examination as a requirement for licensure? And so each of them provided feedback in terms of that. We asked questions about clinical level supervision to practitioners, both as being provided by supervisors and also individuals who received that supervision. Some of those questions dealt with the transition between in-person supervision to remote supervision done by televideo. And we asked for some feedback from them on whether that transition and flexibility has resulted in positive changes, negative changes, or something else. And whether it's led to better access to supervision. That was the intent. I think that was the purpose, but wanted to provide an opportunity to collect feedback to hear directly from individuals. And then there were some questions that dealt with continuing education requirements for their profession. They currently are required to get 40 hours of continuing education, and the advisory committee had been discussing decreasing that down to 30 hours every 2 years. And there was a question about if that decrease would negatively affect professionalism and safe practice. So covered some really good areas with their survey. Some of these could be reduced to a multiple choice, and we have some graphs as part of the report that shows that feedback. But some of the other questions were more open-ended, and as much as possible, when there were different answers, we included the text of those answers, which is in general why the report is that lengthy. And so, but we got back some good information. It was a really good response to the survey as well. I think we had 8,288 or so social workers that were polled, and we got responses back from about 2,800 or so. So not quite half, but a large sampling compared to the number of total licensees. We did a similar survey back in 2021, and we got responses back from about 1,000 people. So increasing that number to about 2,700, 2,800 was a much higher number. So we got really good response rate. But yeah, so the information in this survey, we tried to kind of summarize the process we used and then provide some information as we got it. So like I said, I included this in your packet of material so you could kind of see an example of what we could do on our end. What the social workers did for their advisory committee, they took some time in a meeting and they focused on topics. So they focused on some ideas that they thought they might want to ask about. And then in between that meeting and the next meeting, I worked to kind of draft questions for them to review. And then when they came back for the next meeting, they reviewed those draft questions and offered some tweaks to the wording or changes to make sure that we were asking what we were wanting to get information on. And then after that, we were able to plug that information in, keep it open for about 7 to 10 days, and then collect a good amount of feedback. SurveyMonkey has a pretty nice tool where we can kind of track who has responded to the survey and who hasn't. So we were able to send a couple of reminders to people when they had not responded to the survey. That way, each time we sent one of those out, we got kind of a surge of people providing feedback to it, but it also verified that the people responding to it were actual licensees. And because it was tracked by individual who provided a response, we were able to make sure that it just wasn't floated out there for anyone who wanted to click on the link. So it was a pretty good way to verify the information was good, and the feedback that we received afterwards was really positive. So if you would like, we could do the same or something similar for your profession, but maybe a good example to kind of see what we've done in the past.
So David, I have a couple of questions. Can we, in the questionnaire that we put out, can we have a narrative, an opportunity for people to share a narrative? If we're to ask something like, what would you say would be barriers for becoming a supervisor? A place where a person could just type in their answer.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, okay. There's options where we can set it up as multiple choice, or there's options where we can just give them a text box and let them put in as much information as they would like to.
Okay, so we can do both.
Yeah.
Any questions or feedback so far?
Oh, sorry. And then the report, if somebody included identical answers, then we combined those into one and noted how many people responded with the exact text. But if there were differences, as much as possible, we tried to include their exact wording so that people could see the actual language.
Great. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea, just to try to put something together and send it out. I like the sequence that David just mentioned, come out with some ideas based on what questions and so on, and then the follow-up, kind of make it a little more narrow. And I believe that a good survey always should have one last part that's like comments. Additional comments, in which, people can add something that they maybe thought that as they're putting out this, they can add to the content of what we're trying to do and give to us information. But I really believe that this sequence sound fine to me.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think a survey is the way to go. I think it's a good place to start. We need some basic information, I think, across the state and across professionals. So,
And in general, what we've done for social work is we've limited it to individuals who had a permanent license. So we would send it to all individuals with a permanent LPC and all with a permanent LCPC.
Other questions and feedback? So David, it sounds to me like, was it done in a separate meeting, the creation of the questions?
So kind of the way that we did it with social work is they just kind of threw out some topics and ideas and kind of expressed some interest in about 3 or 4 different areas. And then in between that meeting and the next meeting, I just kind of worked on putting together some maybe draft questions on those areas and then brought that back to the advisory committee to review. So it's kind of one meeting we worked on the topics, and then meeting number 2, we actually adjusted the language and then kind of sent it out after that meeting.
Okay, so I will ask committee members, do we want to go ahead and toss out some ideas for topics at this meeting?
So a little bit ago, we were talking about surveying as to what were some of the ideas or obstacles about becoming a supervisor. So that could be a topical area
Yes.
for this survey rather than doing 2 separate surveys.
Yes.
If you look at the social work, the David just sent to us, it seems that they go to different topics. It's not only concentrate in one area, so they move to different topics, but they get to us around several information about, where we need to take out of this, so. And the area that I mentioned at the end, additional comments or something else you want to add, that will get to us the extra space also for people to add if they think that the survey didn't reach the peak where they want to kind of point it out to us.
Right. Thank you for that. Certainly questions about intentions to switch over to the compact when the compact becomes available. Anyone else have other topics that they feel passionate about that aren't maybe reflected in the social work?
Well, I don't know if I feel passionate about it, but where they feel like they may need more continuing ed.
Okay.
What kind of areas of training or information that would be helpful for them in their practice?
Okay.
There is something that's boiling out on at least 2 states. Texas is one of them, Georgia's another. It's the substitution of school counselors for chaplain. So the whole issue of DEI, is bubbling, which is very interesting because where the legislation is going is against accreditation. So I don't know what that would take, but I do read some news, and David was talking with some board members about this DEI things, because what they're trying to do is how important it is for us to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our continuing ed. Okay. So it would be kind of interesting to know how the councils feel out there about that, I know how to feel, but that's just me. Okay. But I think that because the way how they put it up there is that by talking about diversity, we talking about division. And by talking about diversity, we're talking about cultural competencies.
Mhm.
Okay, so, but anyhow, but I thought that was probably a good place also to ask and get a feeling for the counselors in the field about the subject.
Thank you for that.
So I know your advisory committee has had a few meetings where you've had discussions and you've had guest speakers on the clinical level licensing examination. We've talked about how Kansas currently requires the clinical level exam for the clinical level license. Some other states may not have 2 levels of permanent license, but some of those states may require just the non-clinical level exam or an option of either or. Is it something that you think would be appropriate to ask licensees about?
Well, I don't like to ask people things that I don't want to change. Oh.
I was gonna say, I mean, I know I know for your work, you all have really put in the time digging into the history of that, looking into the differences, hearing from guest speakers. And I don't know that it's been as big of a conversation topic along the state. So if there is the risk that people could be weighing in on a topic because they want to help out and answer a survey question, but they haven't maybe done the same research, then that could be questionable. So if people aren't ready to really consider that question and they still need to do some research, that's understandable. I wanted to mention that because the social workers had asked about their examination, and so
Right.
you had spent time with an advisory committee. I wanted to bring it up to you guys too.
Plus also, I believe that a non-answer is an answer. I mean, so if a lot of people leave one question blank, that tells me something. So it's almost like having a dissertation having no significant differences. When you never get published, you learn something. So.
Mhm.
We also want demographic information provided.
Yeah.
I noticed that there was a the first question was on the county or the area of the state. Are there other things, like, in other words, how many years have you been practicing? That kind of, to give is this someone who's new to the field and new to being licensed, or someone who's been doing it for a while? So.
Yeah,
And on that question, Bob, a date or a year range so that someone doesn't feel like they're being targeted. Oh, they're in
Sure.
this county. They've been practicing 5 years is different than a range. So are
Right.
you okay with the range?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
we would probably ask them also what the highest level of license you have attained, either that's LPC or LCPC. That way we kind of know if we receive most of the responses from clinical level or not.
Right. Good.
David, I didn't see the survey before it went out, but was there a pretty comprehensive explanation of why the social workers were asking what they were asking and what would be done with that data?
No. We sent something out, but it was a pretty short information. And I don't recall the exact message that went with the survey, except that this was being sent on behalf of the Social Work Advisory Committee to really get feedback directly from licensees in the state of Kansas to better assist the discussions and recommendations of the advisory committee and ultimately the board. So I think
Okay.
it was just kind of, kind of distinct like that. But
Okay. Would you send that over at some point so we can get a look at it? I'd like to see what was said and, what can be encouraging to get people to respond. And the social workers had a pretty good turnout, a pretty good response rate.
I agree. And most of that was on day one.
Oh, wow.
The biggest response was when it was originally sent out the first day. And then kind of the second day kind of starts to go low. And then, but the nice thing about our tool is we had a way to send only to the people who hadn't responded to the survey yet. So our
Right.
reminders were not sent to everybody who had already submitted the survey response. But every time we would send a reminder, and I think we only sent 2 more follow-ups, maybe one in the middle and then one on the last day. But we did see kind of a surge whenever we would send those out.
Can we also mention in that intro statement how long the survey will take to complete? So that before I hit enter, I know what I'm getting into.
That's a good point. Yeah, it does kind of estimate the length of time to complete. And this one was only about 7 minutes, even though
That's great.
Yeah.
I would imagine that impacted the response rate.
Yeah. Now, we did have a few, fill in the blank type questions. So if individuals wanted to take more time, there are probably a few outliers, people
Yeah.
wanted to put a lot of information, which is great. But individuals who didn't, I'm sure they could get through that very quickly.
Great. Any other topics that we want to really make sure we touch on?
So I don't know the information here, but Leslie might. One thing that we have talked about with licensees in our licensee count is that the legislature talks about pathways to help more people become licensed, but at the same time, we have individuals that are letting their licenses expire for one reason or another. And we have had conversations about, is there a way to help individuals maintain their licensure? The board has put in something as far as if the continuing education issue, because if, let's say they had something that was a really serious medical emergency, that was a reason why they couldn't complete their hours. They now have an option where they can request up to 3 months of additional time. And if they're approved, they can make up those hours. So we've really been trying to focus on licensees being able to stay licensed. I am curious if there have been supervisors who maybe went through this process and then decided they no longer wanted to become or no longer wanted to be board approved supervisors. And so they wanted to have that be removed for one reason or another. But Leslie, are you familiar with any individuals that maybe became a board approved supervisor that changed their mind and said they no longer want to be?
No, in fact, no, they have not contacted me.
Okay. And I suppose then it would only be the individuals who let their overall license expire that would have dropped off of that group. But if there were, that might be something to kind of target if there were people who had let that go and why they no longer wanted to serve as supervisors. But sounds like that's not a big issue. So.
I wonder if they could be reached out to directly with their own specific questions.
Mhm.
It doesn't sound like it's a big group, but it would still be good data.
It would. Yep.
Okay, I'll make a note about that. So any other topics or feedback about the questionnaire? Okay, so David Fye, it sounds like you and I will do some work between now and our next meeting. And I'm so generous when I say that. I think we know who's going to do the majority of the work as usual. But we'll get together and talk about all of this. And then at the next meeting in June, you'll have some questions that we've drafted or that you have drafted that we can start with for the questionnaire. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your robust discussion about this. The next item, review of consideration of possible changes for 102-3-3A.
Yes, and this is a topic that we have discussed at previous meetings. In your packet of material, I included a copy of KAR 102-3-3A. It's the educational requirements for licensure. And just kind of as a little reminder, when individuals apply for licensure, if they attended a K-CREP accredited school, then we're able to advance those individuals through the process fairly easily, at least to be able to get approved to take the examination. The main language in 102-3-3A really focuses on individuals that came from non-K-CREP accredited programs, either because the existing language says that their program is not KCREP accredited, but not lower than KCREP standards, or because they're essentially receive their education from a non-KCREP accredited program. And you can kind of see that on page 2 under item B, where it says at the time of application, each applicant shall admit the following requirements: received a master's or doctoral degree in counseling or a related field from a program that meets one of the following requirements, is not accredited, is not below the accreditation standards of the Council on Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs, KCREP, or meets the requirements in sections F and sections G. And section F talks about program level requirements. Section G talks about coursework type requirements. And so we had asked the advisory committee to start reviewing this educational regulation. We're asking the other professions to review their education regulation in a similar way. I had reached out to a representative from KCREP who was willing to take a look at our regulation and kind of offer a couple of comments. So I've started that conversation, but if we have specific questions, I'm happy to reach back out to her and see if she can provide some guidance on any specific topics. Leslie and I had a short conversation before this meeting that we also thought, Leslie thought it would be helpful to kind of also see what other states might require. And specifically, she was highlighting Missouri. And I thought that was really beneficial. So I think in between now and the next meeting, we might be able to pull some information about our surrounding states and see what they might require. So that way you can compare what Kansas has in the regulations to some of the other states to see if our requirements are comparable or if they're different. And then we could maybe have the advisory committee have a discussion about why they're different or should they stay different. So, but if anybody has had an opportunity to review sections F and section G, wanted to allow some time for some of those comments. One of the other items we had asked members to have a discussion about is right now, what the board is tasked to do is that if someone applies for licensure and they went to a school that is non-KCREP accredited, and that school is also not below KCREP standards, then their program and coursework must meet the requirements in the regulation. And if it does not, then the board is asked to deny the license for that person because it doesn't meet our existing requirements, which means the items that are included in section F and section G should be pretty important and necessary requirements for licensure. So if there are items listed in section F and section G that may be helpful, maybe best practices, but maybe are not necessary, then that's something that the board could consider if you want to make a recommendation to them. If there's something in there that seems to stick out that maybe it was helpful 20 years ago, but now, if it's missing, we would not want to deny the license for someone because that item is missing. That's kind of the thought process and sort of the analysis. So hopefully that frames the discussion appropriately. But if there are individuals in the advisory committee that have thoughts or questions, we could have some of that conversation today and then continue it in the future meeting.
Thank you, David. Okay, any feedback? So it sounds like we will go ahead and review these and come back, and you're going to go ahead and research what other states are doing, what other topics come up as a result of that, and then we'll finish that up at our next meeting.
Yes, Leslie has started to pull the information from Missouri, and I think that was a really good idea. So being able to share that with members of the advisory committee for comparison, I think would be nice.
That'd be great.
If we could find something from some other surrounding states, that might be helpful as well. But Leslie, do you have any other comments to make in terms of what you were able to find?
Well, I've only pulled off Oklahoma and Missouri so far, so I'll continue to pull off those close around us. I mean, I can go as far as you'd like, however much information you want. I do know that one thing I've seen in a lot of states for coursework is they don't have a separate course for the helping relationship. Sometimes that's combined in another course.
Orientation, intro. Yeah, they usually stay together. When when you look at all the states, definitely please stay out from Texas
Uh-huh.
because they have one of the most crazy laws that you ever seen. You know,
Texas,
so
okay.
so to try to make it easier, you're not trying to make it more difficult.
So don't pay attention.
So yeah, I'll do that and have that ready for you for the next meeting.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
David, I do have a question on that first page, 1023-3A. And it talks about number 2 in residence, and the part of the sentence that's crossed out is that done yet?
That's a good question. So we are in the process. The reason I included this version of 102-3-3A is because this has gone through the Department of Administration. It's gone through the Attorney General's office. We received approval to publish this as a proposed change. It's now gone through the 60-day time for public comment. We had the official meeting at the board office last week to allow other individuals to come to the office and provide additional feedback. So now the next step is for the board to take an official roll call vote to formally adopt these proposed changes or to do something different. And so the next full board meeting is in May. But if the board is ready to go ahead and vote at that time, what the board is going to be asked to do is to adopt these changes. And then at that point, we will be able to publish a clean version of this in the Kansas Register. And then I think either 10 or 15 days after that, then it will become effective. So we are getting close to the end stage at this point. So I think probably this will be implemented by the time your advisory committee meets next.
Okay.
There may be a little additional language, possibly. When we went before the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, they expressed a little confusion at the term synchronous for video conferencing. So this is the first time we've tried to, or we've thought about making a post-hearing change. But as I understand it, if you have a change that is a natural extension of the language of the regulation, that is not a big fundamental change, potentially you could add some additional language and you wouldn't have to reopen that 60-day public comment time period. So I think we're going to be working with the Attorney General's office to see if maybe we can add a couple of different words in there just to kind of clarify that synchronous language. But we did our best to explain that in committee, but that was one of the comments that the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations had. So we may have some additional language as far as that goes, but nothing substantial that would be changed between this and that. So,
in other words, it would still mean the same thing. You're just changing the phrasing of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adding clarification.
Okay.
yeah, their main comments were synchronous, and then for the addiction counseling, they wanted more clarity on the term biopsychosocial. And so, so adding some additional language to kind of clarify that term, but nothing that would be a big substantial change, just some additional clarifying language.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyone else with questions or feedback today? Okay, well, thank you for your ongoing discussion. It looks like we'll be wrapping some of this up at our next meeting. Okay, last topic, additional topics for 2024. We always try to get to this, and it's amazing that we actually have some time. So, that broad statement of additional topics, what else, what other priorities are you seeing out there that we can take on this year? Things we may not know about or may not be on our radar. I will not take silence as we're perfect and we have no work to do.
I was trying to think of some of the things that are happening at the legislative level. I know there's a lot of things going on right now, and they're not coming to my mind. David, do you know of some things that are happening that we should be thinking about?
Well, I know that there is ongoing conversation about trying to have pipelines to help with workforce. Workforce tends to be one of the biggest issues. Um, multi-state compacts are also something that has been popular, but your compact passed last year. So, but I think, last year in the large bill, the BSRB offered, we had a student level license for the,
Yeah.
so we had our first ever student temporary addiction counseling license. And it was for individuals that had about 60 hours of coursework in addiction counseling or a related field. And they had an agreement with their school, an agreement with a potential employer. And then they had to be making progress over the course of that 2 years. They had the student level license. And some groups did ask, is there a way to do this for other professions under the BSRB? There are some unique aspects about the addiction counseling profession, and that they work in certain facilities that have a certain level of supervision. But if that is something that you wanted to have some discussion on, if there's possibly a student type temporary license for professional counseling, I think under the umbrella of workforce or pipelines, I think that would be something that could be helpful.
I like that idea, that kind of temporary licensure. Do you remember, David, in that discussion, wasn't there something brought up about maybe providing funding to individual agencies or supervisors or something like that to oversee the students?
I don't recall that. If it's possible, there have been a few different groups kind of trying to tackle this topic. I know that in kind of a larger discussion, there was some talk about maybe making money available for things like tuition reimbursement and other ways to encourage students to go in certain fields. But I don't remember hearing anything about money specifically for like employment type positions.
Be interested in exploring that early licensure, because something I've noticed a bit of a trend in is interns practicing in private practice and charging.
Oh,
I find that interesting, but I have seen that
Yeah,
quite a bit.
I see it a lot in Kansas City. Yeah.
So
really?
I'd find that I mean, interns are required to keep malpractice insurance. Typically, most universities, I think, require that. Hopefully all. But that, I just think that gives a little more oversight, or could give a little more oversight than just the university's oversight. So, or the non-profit or the private practice that they're doing it under's oversight.
Oh,
And I would agree too. I think that would be a great area for us to consider. Matter of fact, when I saw that as a possibility for one of the other for substance abuse counseling, I thought, gee, what a great idea. So,
Right.
So typically, interns and other professions get compensated, get paid. It's quite often that our interns in counseling don't get any kind of compensation.
right.
And so if there was money made available for them to be compensated, that would minimize them billing insurance for their services, because that's one of the obstacles. It's difficult to do an internship and not be paid.
and Harriet, you bring up a very good point, because currently at our facility, we pay our interns, but we do not charge for any services that they provide. We gain the benefit of them seeing some clients without coverage, but mostly we're doing it for the purpose of training. So that's why I was just curious.
I would suspect it'd still be very hard to get insurance to pay
Yeah.
for any reimbursement. I mean, just recently they started reimbursing, well, private insurance is a little bit better for LPC level, but used to be that you couldn't even get them to credential at that level. So it'd be many years, but eventually, if there was enough need, that's how they change their mind, right? Is they need
Yeah.
more people paneled. So
So this will be a great topic for us to take on. It
Yeah.
sounds like we've got some real opportunity here to develop something that will impact workforce, and I love the idea that of more oversight.
another topic that I don't know if we'd be able to tackle it this year, but I do think in the future we're going to want to look at, and maybe, I think probably the whole field will be looking at is the pretty significant move to mostly online training and kind of like how that's impacting our field and skill sets and quality and even numbers. Like I think our numbers are going to go up. I think we're seeing larger numbers of candidates, but I do wonder what that will all look like in many years down the road. So
I agree with that topic. I appreciate you bringing that up. And I will be honest with the group. Last year was the first year that I think I got almost all of my continuing ed online.
Wow.
So it is changing.
Yeah.
I guess it's definitely more convenient. I probably got a little bit more out of the in-person, but it was convenient. So that's a good topic.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up. In the interest of time, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. But what I'll say is if you have additional topics that come up between now and our next meeting, shoot David a text saying, or an email rather, saying, let's add this to the additional topics for 2024, and we will do it. Thank you today for all your robust discussion. These are important topics, and this is a very productive meeting. The next meeting we have will be June 3rd at 2024 at 10 a.m. Acha, that'll be midnight your time. And I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Second. Thank you so much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I doubt I'll hear any opposed. Okay, Acha, you get some rest, and everybody stay safe with the Kansas weather.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
one.
you for your time. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
No, it's not okay.